Okay.
So kia ora whānau. I'm Christine Lane, so I'll just kick us off with a karakia before we kick off. So we've got online community as well with us tonight. First time we've done it. I didn't know, John, that you were coming to this. Okay, hi. Didn't want to single you out, you just surprised me. So let's kick off with a karakia first, and then I'll introduce myself, and then I'll hand it over to Steve. So, whakatakateho ki te uru, whakatakateho ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai, ihi aki ana ti atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hohu. Tihei Māori ora. So kia ora whānau, I'm Christine Lane. I'm the Community and Economic Lead here at Selwyn District Council. So part of my role is to roll out Communities in Action, which is part of the series here at tonight. So every month we run a meeting, a hui, around things that we're seeing in the community, needs for not-for-profit sports clubs, just people out in the community wanting to learn things and upskill themselves, whether or not upskill themselves personally or upskill themselves within a voluntary organisation that you are involved in. So one of the things we hear about a lot is around sharing meetings, and we're really lucky in our district to have Steven here living. He's not an import, he's local, and I've known Steven for a long time, and I can put his accolades up and things like that. But what I'll say is we're really, really lucky to have Steven in our community. I've worked with him for 6 years. I'd consider us friends. I'm not sure Steven considers me a friend because I'm always knocking at his door asking for things. But yeah, so Steven is a partner at Parry Field Law. Parry Field Law have a history for being really community orientated for lawyers. I know Ken Lord, who's one of I think he's founder, isn't he?
He was there for about 40 years, so long time.
Yeah, and very instrumental around advising trusts and things like that within the church community, which is kind of, I think, where Parry Fields is really their roots. So Steven is a lawyer, and as I say, I'm blessed enough to have him really as a friend, always knocking at his door asking for things. And he's so available, very humble about the stuff he does. I'm sure he can talk to you about that, but I'd like to have confidence in telling you that a classic example was the other day, actually, I had a residents group wanting to change their constitution, and we've engaged Steven several times around what sort of legal structures trust should have. And I CC'd Steven, and because it got way out of my knowledge, and Steven's like, yep, I'll call him. Well, here's my phone number, give me a call. I'll be on the motorway in half an hour. So completely accessible, no charges. And yeah, that's made a big difference. And how many lawyers go and do that for free of charge? So yeah, I'll hand over to Steven because he's far more knowledgeable around these subjects, and we can go from there.
Great. All right. Tēnā koutou katoa, no America ho no te tematanga, ko te taita toku manga, ko waitaki toku awa, ko otatahi toku kainga inaine, e roia toku tunga mahi o Parry Field Lawyers, ko Steven Moe toku ingoa no reira namihi kia koutou katoa. I'm really excited to be here because this is actually a really interesting topic. We're going to be looking at chairing meetings. So before we get into that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background as to who I am, like why have I been asked to be here. Yeah, that's kind of setting the scene. And then we're going to dive into having a discussion. I don't view this as, it's not going to be like a lecture. I much prefer like a facilitated sort of hearing from you as well. I might need to repeat back what you say so that the people online can also hear. But I want to hear your insights and your thoughts rather than me just talking the whole time. So I think, yeah, Christine, definitely a friend. I think we've known each other several years, and I've been active in this community sector area. But my background, my origin, if you want to go back that far, is you can hear my accent. So I'm from America originally, but moved to New Zealand way back in 1983. So my father was a marine biologist, kind of unusual profession, brought us to New Zealand down to the Waitaki River near Oamaru down south. So he was raising fish in the early 1980s. And then we moved to Christchurch in 1989. And so I went to high school here. I went to Canterbury University, and then I became a lawyer in 2001. So it's hard to believe, but that's like 23 years now I've been working as a lawyer, which means I've helped many boards, many chairs, many people through what they are having questions about. And I've been a lawyer here in New Zealand, but I've also practiced as a lawyer for 3 years in London, for 4 years in Tokyo, for 4 years in Sydney, and then came back to Christchurch 8 years ago. And I am a local in the sense of I live over on Marlow Place, right around. If we're heading towards Countdown, you keep going along that way. Like I'm literally live here in Rolleston. My son goes to that school right across the way. So I feel quite connected and I really enjoy coming and supporting what Selwyn District Council is doing. And I think it's kind of rare, to be honest, that a council offers such sessions like this that people can come to. So yeah, that's kind of the background from the legal perspective. But then the practical perspective as well is that I sit on about 8 different committees or boards myself, and I'm the chair of a couple. One of them I'll tell you about. It's a social housing provider. Well, actually, it provides financing for social housing. So it's called community finance. And we've raised in the last 3 years, $163 million that goes to social housing providers. We're doing that by accessing KiwiSaver funders and allowing them to get access to money at rates that are better than commercial bank rates. So I'm the chair of that board. And so that's the reason it's relevant for the topic today. Like I've had to learn a lot and be involved in chairing many meetings and many boards. I see some people are joining online, so I'm just going to multitask here and make sure. Yeah. So that's kind of the background, and I think that's why I've been asked to share with you today. So I'm curious to know, in this room and online, I'm sure there's a lot of people who have a lot of background as well. So maybe just raise your hand. Have any of you chaired meetings before? Is that something? Yep. Yep. Some of you. Yep. Well, most of you. That's great. So we got a lot of wisdom in the room to share. Like I always view these sessions not so much like this is a university lecture. It's more like, oh, okay, that's a great idea. I've never thought of that. So that's the style that I want this to be. I think it's more interactive and we'll actually learn more if we can hear from each other. So yeah, when it comes to chairing meetings, I think, to be honest, a whole other topic would be being the chair of a board. I think that's a really interesting topic. What I'm going to be talking about mainly today is chairing meetings. So you're the chair of this meeting. But if anybody's interested and you want to talk about chairing the board, I think that's another topic that's really relevant. Being a chair myself, from a legal perspective, in companies law, do you think that there's sections about being the chair of the board? Like, is there more responsibility if you're the chair? What do we think? The answer is no. There's no reference to being the chair of a board, like you're a director of a company. It's not a different standard if you're the chair, which is quite interesting because actually being the chair is a lot of responsibility and it's a lot more that's required. One of the things that's going to come out as we're talking is that it's not so much the IQ that's needed to be a good chair. It's the EQ, it's the emotional intelligence of looking at a room and reading it and knowing who hasn't spoken, who's spoken too much, and how do we make sure that we're hearing from everybody. So yeah, but legally speaking, being the chair or being, in a board of directors or in a trust situation, incorporated society, all of these entities, the chair themselves, it's not like there's another standard for them. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to think about that. You're taking on an extra responsibility, but it's not governed by the law. So I thought what we could do is, and we'll go as short or as long as the room dictates. I thought it would be good to break down chairing a meeting well by thinking about 3 different stages of that meeting. So does that sound like a good plan? Now, I think all of you in the room have a copy of this document. You got it as you came in. I actually have plenty because I printed them and Christine printed them. We wanted to make sure there was lots. So at the end, if you think actually this would be helpful to give to my committee or give to other people that I know in other boards or whatever, you're very welcome to take some at the end. And then online, hopefully you got an email that attached or, oh, it's in the chat. Okay, well, if you haven't found it yet, look in the chat and there's a link there so you can click it and you can go and have a look. So I thought we'd use this as the framework for our discussion. So the first thing is kind of what I was saying to introduce myself. A chair is a facilitator. If you're a good chair, you're a facilitator. You're not there to dictate everything that happens. You're not there to force a decision. A good chair is there to gain the collective ideas. And then here's the key part, be able to crystallize it into, okay, we've all had our chance to speak. Here's what we're going to do, or here's the next course of action. So that's kind of, it's important to remember that as a framing point. Before we get into the 3 stages, it's important to remember that a good chair is there to facilitate, not to dictate, not to be autocratic, you know, you must do this. And I think that's a mentality that you need to bring to your meetings. I'm here to facilitate it. And I think, oh, the other thing is at the end here, if we have time, I'm going to share with you. I posted on LinkedIn and asked for advice. And I said, what do you think a good chair does in a meeting? So at the end of the document, there's a whole bunch of ideas that are kind of crowdsourced ideas from people out in the community and other groups. If you cared to look up the names, you'd find that some of these people have been in board positions for 30 years, 40 years, even 50 years, like masses of experience here. So we'll get to that probably towards the end. Yeah, so if we're coming to a meeting, before the meeting, what are some of the things that we can do before the meeting actually begins? Maybe before we look at this list here, any thoughts from the room? Any things that you do to prepare for a meeting that you could share with us?
Creating agenda.
Creating an agenda? Yep, having an agenda. How do you create the agenda? Who creates the agenda? Is it the chair that does it, or is it someone else? Yep. And what does your agenda look like? How long is it? What does it cover?
I've involved in the community, in cooperative society. So most of the time, I think it's probably in calendar.
Yeah.
Most of the time, evening, because in the activities.
Yeah.
Most of the things we have in the year calendar.
Yeah.
So we prepare all of the agenda, how to make it happen there.
Okay, so just to summarize for the people online, you're coming from an incorporated society and you have a year-long work plan. There's lots of events that happen. So your agenda reflects what's coming up.
Yes.
And that's how you create it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. How long would it be normally? Like 1 page or 10 pages or?
No, not that much long. This is because I already fixed and set up in the calendar so that we go through the calendar evidence and how many events in the year we're gonna do and other activities. So first we decide that, and after that, we go how we do the task division.
Yeah. So the agenda is just summarizing what's
Summarize.
coming up
Yes.
and relatively short, like a page.
Yes.
Yep.
So yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, some of the things I'd like to share with you about an agenda, because I've seen a lot of agendas. How many of you have been to meetings and the agenda gets sent round and you notice the date is the last meeting? Does it ever happen? No? Yeah, you recognize that? So it can be a really useful tool before the meeting even starts as the chair, that you've set a clear agenda. This is what we're going to be talking about. And one of the reasons is that during the meeting, if somebody raises something and it's not on the agenda, guess what? As the chair, you can say, that is an excellent point. Thank you for raising it. We're going to defer that to the next meeting. It's not on the agenda. We all, this is the agenda. This is what we're covering. So agendas are really important. The other tip that I have about agendas is try to think as the chair, how much time each of the things is going to take. How many of you have been to meetings and you think it's going to be half an hour and 3 hours later, you're still going, right? Part of that is down to the chair and how well they've structured the meeting and how well they've managed the time. So the point is, you could have agenda item number 3, 15 minutes, agenda item number 4, 10 minutes, agenda item number 5. Like, doesn't have to be 45 minutes. You could allocate time. And I think that then forces all of the people at the meeting to really go, okay, we have this amount of time for it. Let's be honest, it's going to overrun often, right? But at least you have something that you can bring people back to and say, we're going to move on now because we've now spent 20 minutes and we'd allocated 10. So I find that's quite a helpful tool as well. The other thing that I find interesting is how the first thing on our agendas is often, let's approve the minutes of the last meeting. I actually think this is a little bit controversial, but I think that that's something that's basically admin. Like, it's very rare that it becomes a massive discussion point. I would rather see whatever is the most important thing. That's what you start talking about, rather than, because the minutes is past, right? It's in the past. It's not forward looking, but the role of boards is to be forward, future looking. So one idea would be to actually push the minutes for approval as part of the admin part of a meeting, rather than making it like, okay, number 1, it's actually not the most important thing, but we're dealing with it. So I don't know, does anyone want to push back on that idea? I'm happy. Every group is going to be slightly different.
I don't know, I guess it's if you have a secretary within your board that's taking notes, that's more what you're approving, that
Yeah.
they get circulated around afterwards.
Yeah.
Provided that they've read them first.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's a secretary there, they might want it covered first and then move on as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, it can take up to 10 minutes just to go over what we've already gone over.
Yeah.
the Previous meeting.
Yeah.
10 hours.
Yeah. Well, that's my fear, is that and maybe I'm not sure how many of you have done lots of thinking about governance and what governance is. So why don't I give you a little picture on that, because I think it might be helpful. So I do a lot of facilitating for the Institute of Directors. That's the preeminent organization in New Zealand, more than 10,000 members. All the top directors are there. So I go and I train people about governance. And the picture I give of governance is a ship. And a ship is moving along the ocean, heading in this direction. And the ship springs a leak, or the sail has a rip in it. It's not governance to go and fix the rip, or to plug the hole, or to sweep the deck. That's what's called management. That's the maintaining, continuing on. The ship has to keep moving. Governance is the people who get into a helicopter and fly up high above the ship. And they're 2 kilometers above, right? They have a big perspective, because on the ship, you can only see, oh, we need to fix that hole. Oh, we need to fix that rip in the sails. But from the helicopter, what can you see? Into the distance, into the future. So your role in being on boards and being involved in governance is to be forward-looking, because the people in the helicopter can see there's an iceberg ahead. And if we don't shift our course, we will crash into the iceberg. So when you're thinking about what your role is, whether you're the chair or board member, you're there to be in the helicopter looking into the future and saying, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, what will our organization be having an issue with? And how can we start preparing now? So hopefully that's a helpful picture for you when you're thinking about governance and what your role is. Because too often, and let's be honest, if it's voluntary organizations, this happens a lot. You're the one mending the sail. You're the one fixing the hole in the boat. There's a blurring between the two. But strictly speaking, from a governance perspective, you are in the helicopter, you're looking out, telling the captain of the ship, we need to change course now, or we're going to crash. So hopefully that's a helpful picture for you next time you're in a board meeting and you start talking about something really detailed. Shouldn't be done at a board meeting, should be done separately outside. So like, just give an example, community group, having a board meeting and you produce a newsletter that goes out to people. Like, what font should we use for our newsletter? Sure. What size font, what color should we use? You know, those are detailed questions that someone needs to handle, but it's probably not the governance level that should be handling it. So always try to ask yourself, is this what we should be doing at the board level? Or is this like a committee task or someone else needs to do it? Because I think a lot of meetings waste a lot of time talking about things that are not governance, they're actually management. So yeah, little tangent there, but hopefully it's helpful thinking about governance itself. So yeah, okay, before the meeting, let's continue on. There's a list here. It's just meant to provoke us in our thinking and discussion. Number 3, ensuring that board papers are distributed before the meeting. So let's do a quick poll here. What's the average? How long before a meeting do your papers get sent round? Or do they get sent round? What have we got? Is it anyone for a week before?
Yeah.
Yeah, a week before. That's great. And anyone the night before or the day before? Usually the day before. Yeah. Is that quite common?
They say, usually they mention, we will send it a week before.
Yep.
And then we get it a day before.
Get it a day before. Yep. Yep. Any other groups? Any differences?
We've got one that does 3 days before, does 5,
Okay, 3 days before and 5 days before. Yep.
usually a week.
So there's time, so sending it before, so there's a weekend so you can review it. Yeah. I mean, best practice is that you actually need time to read the papers. This comes back to chairing well. How often have you been in meetings and you can tell that people are reading the papers right then? They have not read them before the meeting. Like, that's not going to be an efficient meeting. Actually getting the papers a week before. So I love your answer. A week before is enough time for you to look at them on the screen or print them or whatever, go through them. And then you're coming to the meeting prepared, so that you're not halfway through a discussion point and someone asks a question which is answered the next page over, but clearly they did not read the papers. So that would be my suggestion, like a week before. So chairing the meeting well, like this is all before the meeting, right? But your job, or one of the things that you can do to ensure your meetings go well, is to make sure people have the information like well in advance. And that's hard because think about it, a week before, that means that you need to have got the agenda ready, like more than a week before, and get the papers ready and then hit send. Yeah, but it's kind of a courtesy to your board members that I respect you enough. I've been on many boards though, where you arrive at the meeting and then here's some papers like right now. So I'm just giving you ideas of what's good practice. Yeah. All right, the number 5 in this particular list, I've put considering board culture. So yeah, have you ever thought about board culture and what your boards are like? Like, how do you interact with each other? You can tell a lot in the first 5 minutes of a board meeting, how much engagement there is, how much willingness to contribute there is, how often is the chair saying, that's not how we do things around here, you know, be quiet, essentially. So the board culture side is, I think it's important to think about beyond the strict board meeting times. Have you had dinner together? Have you connected outside of your strict board meeting? Because oftentimes you'll get to know, I'm on another board. I was just up in Auckland and we had dinner after the board meeting. It was like a 6-hour board meeting, so it was quite intense. Then we had dinner and I'm sitting with one of my fellow board members and realizing that I don't really know them, but we had an hour and a half having food, talking, and now we're actually talking about a collaboration that we might work on separate to that particular board thing. So the point is, as the chair, how are you using time that is not board time, like gathering, suggesting you get together? Do any of your boards do this? Do you have times you come together? You do?
Yeah, we start every board meeting with dinner.
You start every board meeting with dinner. Yeah, right. So it's the kind of breaking bread together and conversations and yeah, and that obviously works for your board. Yeah.
We'll meet at 6, so.
So you meet at 6 and you have dinner and then move into the board meeting, right? Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, the other thing related to this is not on the piece of paper, but strategy days, like time away, not in a board setting, but making time for your group to be thinking about the future, getting into the helicopter. Because let's be honest, if you're a volunteer and you're a board member, you're probably, it's not your full-time job, right? So actually taking time away with your fellow board members to say, once a year, we're going to devote 4 hours on a Saturday morning or whatever it is, and we're going to get into the helicopter because we're too often on the ship. We're not able to get into that high level blue skies thinking. What if this happened? Because your board meetings are the next event is coming, or we just had a crisis, or we need to employ someone. So having, as the chair, making sure that you're getting time away together to think about strategy is actually a really important part of being a good chair. Yeah, number 6 in our list is maintaining a board calendar. So that's detailing what's going to happen over the year. I got an email on last Thursday from someone saying, dear committee, just letting you know that our next meeting is next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And I wrote back and I said, like, is it possible to get notice of all the meetings in this year, now? Because then I can put it in my calendar and I don't have like a surprise. So hopefully you're already doing this, but setting an agenda of what's our schedule for the whole year so that everyone's clear. Everyone knows we meet every 2 months, every 3 months, every 1 month, every 2 weeks, whatever it is, there's a rhythm there. Yeah, and then number 7 on the before the meeting, I've just put here, being the chair involves as much of the EQ as the IQ. And so active listening, summarizing issues, presenting, asking for input. Guess what? Those are all skills that you can improve and hone and grow outside of the meeting. The meeting's the best time to practice them and to put them into place, but YouTube is full of videos on how to present. YouTube is full of videos on how to become a good questioner, a good active listener. I hear what you're saying, and I think that what you're meaning is this. Did I get that right? Like, those are skills that each of you can become world-leading experts in before you get to the meeting. So the fact that you're here today, and it's great to see so many of you online as well, that shows that you have a curiosity, you want to improve. So don't let this be the stop of it, like this is the, hopefully, yeah, I can get better at all of these skills before the meeting. All right, and then, so we talked about before the meeting, what are some of the things to do? Does anybody have anything else that you do before a meeting? If lots of you are chairs, help me out. Is there anything that you suggest that really helps your before the meeting time? Did I summarize it so well? There's nothing to add. That's fine too.
I have started asking, like, when I had a chair report, and then I have started asking them if I'm sort of taking them through that, charities restructure. To, think about what it is that the organisation is to them, and where they fit into it. It's an
Okay.
Association, so asking an active question, so that when they get to that discussion, that they've actually thought about it, and it's not just big blah, 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 and then try and.
Okay, so in your chair report where you're summarizing things,
Yeah.
you're asking people to be thinking, what's your role in the organization and what are you thinking about a particular thing? So then when you get to that point, they're ready. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, get people thinking in advance, right?
Helps supporting people.
Oh, really? 14 people on a committee. Yeah. Well, that's a challenge in itself. Like, that's almost like the people here, right? Like, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to your insights on during the meeting then, because that will be a challenge. All right. Well, why don't we move to during the meeting? And let's have a talk about some of these things. So during the meeting, I think it's important to begin with some sort of a check-in. I've seen a lot of meetings where the chair is just like, right, agenda item number 1, usually approval of last minutes, but actually having a moment to maybe reflect and everybody can say like, what are you bringing today? Like, what's your energy level? I've seen people ask this in lots of different ways. You know, it's kind of, it can be a creative time. What color are you today? Like, you know, get people thinking like, oh, I'm feeling green because of da da da, or I'm feeling blue because of da da da, whatever it is. So it's a chance to check in before the meeting actually starts. You could start with a karakia or some way to focus people at the beginning. Just, okay, we're now here, we're in a space. I like that idea that when people gather, there's actually an energy that comes from that. And it's a recognition of the, here we are together. Let's all, you know, bringing our energy. And that's number 10, actually, is bringing energy and enthusiasm. I think that it's really important to remember that the chair has a responsibility to set the tone of the meeting. How many of you have been in meetings and it's boring, right? And it's partly the responsibility of the chair. The chair has to bring the energy and enthusiasm. One of the things that I've learned is that I have to bring that energy into meetings and also into presenting like this, you know, like just being able to speak and talk with energy helps to lift the game of everybody if the chair can bring that. All right, moving on, I think encouraging active participation, asking for opinions. And this is one of the key roles for chairs, actually, is to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. So it's important to make sure that as the chair, you're not, in fact, dominating as well. So the chair should be asking for opinions. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Because ultimately you're there to facilitate and help the meeting to come to decisions. So yeah, it's not just for you to be talking the whole time. Has anybody encountered that before, or does that resonate with you? Yeah. Yeah, it's something that's hard to do though. But everyone who's on the board or the committee is there for a reason. Each one of them brings different experiences and backgrounds. So your job as the chair is to unlock that, hear from all these different perspectives. And if you're not doing that, then you're actually missing out. Sometimes some people can dominate meetings, and that's not good. One of the pieces of advice from LinkedIn was if there's, say, 6 people in the meeting, then as a rough rule of thumb, each of you should be talking for 1/6 of the meeting. And if one person is talking half of the time, then you're definitely missing out on other perspectives. Have you ever had dominant people in your meetings who have a lot to say? Yeah, we all have. Yeah. Well, let's stop on that for a second. How do you deal with that? What do you do if there's someone who has many things to say? A lot of you nodded your head that you did. What do you do? What are some solutions?
I'm just picking up cheese.
Right. So you're learning. Yeah, yep.
It's really frustrating.
We go back to the timeline that you put in for each agenda,
Yeah.
so that, you know, someone gets, let's say, 2 minutes. They may go over it, but we have got something, you know, to signal that.
Okay, so coming back to the agenda and the time that you've given for the item, and then saying like, okay, we've got 2 minutes each or something like that. And how do you monitor that? Do you have someone looking at the watch, or what is it?
Will be facilitating for the meeting to
Mhm.
look at the time management on that,
Hmm.
and then they will let us know.
And is that something everybody's bought into it? Then everyone agrees this is a good thing.
It took a while to get there, but now I think it has been effective.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. So you've, in the board meeting, not necessarily the chair, but someone is there looking at the watch and saying it, and what, ringing a bell? No?
Yeah, they'll just give a signal saying that you. 2 minutes or something
Okay.
Like that, so that they
Yeah.
will know.
So signaling to the person, you now have this much time left. Yeah, interesting. Good. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Oh, there's a hand up online. How do I do that? Should I? Would you like to share? John, go ahead.
If it needs to be reinforced, outside of the meeting, just having a bit of a mentoring talk with the person
Yeah,
and giving them the opportunity to say, well, you know, something like, you had a great deal to say. Are there some ways that we could change the meeting procedure so that you don't have, so that we can all have an equal say, so that you're not pulling them aside and telling them off, but you're working with them to help them understand why you use the techniques that have been raised during the meeting.
yeah. I like that. Thank you so much, John. So I think all of us in the room heard it, but just in case, not necessarily raising it during the meeting and saying, you know, you're talking too much essentially, but actually taking it offline and in almost a mentoring role, having a conversation and saying, how can we structure things to make sure that you're heard, but also that we hear other people? Yeah, that's a really good thought. And it raises a good point, John, in the sense of the chair's job doesn't finish when the meeting finishes. This is what I meant before, like being a chair is actually a hard job. It's a hard position because you have to then be thinking of the dynamics of the group. And, you know, that person was upset at that point in the meeting. Maybe I'll just give them a quick call. Hey, what were your reflections about the meeting? You know, was there anything that you felt like we needed to think about? Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The meeting doesn't just, well, the role of the chair doesn't just finish at the meeting necessarily. All right, number 12, I put in, there's a reference to moving and seconding. How many of you move or second your decisions? Yep. So it's really, really common, but the link, you can't see it here, but if you click the link in the PDF, it's going to take you to an article I wrote with two amazing Pacifica women, Mele Wendt and Karen Rangi. They're both decades of experience in governance. And in the article, we talk about the fact that moving and seconding is actually a relatively recent thing. It came out of the American Civil War, believe it or not. There was a book written called Robert's Rules of Order in about the 1880s. And it set out guidelines for how to run meetings. And one of them was you should have a mover and a seconder, and then you have the vote. But actually in the article, what we point out is that's actually quite a Western conception of decision-making itself, because it's asking for an individual to move something, like it's my thing, and then someone else, individual, seconds it. So a more Te Ao Maori or Pacifica perspective might say, We want to develop consensus. We want to come together and we make the decision rather than an individual is moving or seconding it. So that article, the IOD has told me it's the most viewed article of all time by the Institute of Directors. It just came out about 9 months ago, but it's really resonated with people like, yeah, why do we move or second? So I do a lot of, when I'm speaking, sometimes people will raise their hand and said, I read your article. We just moved and seconded that we would no longer move and second. So kind of interesting. So I guess just a chance to challenge the assumptions of why do we do things and actually make it appropriate for your group. Might not be appropriate. It might be appropriate in some situations. So if you were at an AGM and there was 50 people and someone at the back said, raised their hand and said, I would like to propose, and then fill in the blank with something really crazy, like just no one will ever agree to that. If you're the chair in that context, you might then say, well, actually, instead of putting it to a vote, does anybody second that motion? And that's a way to then deal with it. No one seconds it. I'm sorry, but we're not going to move forward. So it does have a place, but just not for every possible thing that comes up in a meeting. So definitely click there. And if you are interested, you can read the article about moving and seconding. So just finishing up on the during the meeting section, I think there's some thoughts here that you can read on your own. Encourage critical thought, avoiding groupthink, asking challenging questions. What could go wrong? Is this the best option? What will the world look like in 10 years? How does that affect the issue? I think those are really good types of questions that you as the chair can be throwing in, getting people thinking. I liked what you were saying before in your chair report, getting people thinking in advance. What is it that's coming? Yeah. All right. Has anybody else got thoughts about during the meeting? Anything that you want to raise or that you notice or that helps you?
Yeah.
Yep.
I sometimes have meetings with people with halo effects. That means they either hire or they have more experience, and then sometimes they have influence other people or willingness to talk. So one thing I found particularly helpful is to summarize what that person is saying and say, this is, and just know that that is that person's perspective.
Yeah.
So they put it in context so that other people can have space to.
Okay. So I'm just going to summarize for them online. You're talking about the halo effect, or the fact that in a meeting, there might be some dynamics of power. And for example, if your employer is there or your boss is there and they're making a statement, it might be very hard to disagree with what they've said. So as a chair, what you can do is summarize what the person said and have it as a container of that's what this person thinks, rather than you can't disagree with your boss or your someone in the hierarchy. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Particularly if there's power dynamics that are even cultural, like within certain communities, it would be very disrespectful to disagree with the kaumātua, the elder in your setting. So, but one of the important things that we do in governance is ask hard questions. And usually, have you ever found this? If you ask a question, if you don't ask a question, the next person will ask that question. Like it's there, it's in the room. If you don't ask it, someone else might ask it. So you probably should ask it, because there's not going to be a silly question. Yeah. Great. All right, now we're going to have, he's not here, but we're going to have a little input from Sam Broughton, the mayor of Selwyn. So he came to an opening of a building down the road on Saturday, and I just grabbed him. He's on the podcast that I do called Seeds. There's a card in front of those of you who are here. I've interviewed 383 inspiring people about their life stories. And Sam was on a long time ago. He'd just become the mayor at that point. So anyway, I pulled him aside and I said, what are some tips? Like, I'm going to be meeting with Selwyn-based community groups. What are some tips that you have for chairing a meeting well? And as you probably know, he's been in many meetings and has many hats that he wears in his job. So he said there were 5 things that he wanted to pass on to you. The first one was having a long-term vision and knowing where this meeting is taking you. So it's bigger vision than just we're talking about this today, knowing where you're headed. So the chair has a vision. Number 2, owning the agenda, knowing exactly what's coming up. So as the chair, you're not surprised by anything. You know, well, you helped to write the agenda, hopefully. Number 3, expecting a range of perspectives so that you can hear all the voices. So you know going into the meeting, there's going to be different views. Number 4, meetings are for making decisions, so be clear on what the meeting has decided and any actions expected. So that's really important. Like we just had a 35-minute discussion. What next? Being able to summarize it and say, here's what we've agreed, here's where we're going is really, really important. And number 5, he said he thought consensus decisions are preferable. They can take longer than a majority decision, but it's worth the wait. So consensus doesn't necessarily mean that everybody agrees with it, but there's a mood or a vibe is we have enough agreement where we can say, this is the way we're headed. So I thought those were really good tips. So thank you, Sam, if you ever watch this or you listen to it. We're recording it because not everybody could make it tonight. So yeah, some good tips. Any of those stand out to you from our mayor? Did you like some of those or ring true? Yeah. All right, now we've talked about before the meeting, we talked about during the meeting, but it doesn't end there, does it? After the meeting, what are some things that you need to be thinking about if you are the chair? So the first one I put in the list, actioning any tasks allocated to you. Like you need to lead from the front. Can't expect your committee members, your board members to be going out and doing things if you yourself aren't doing the things that you were allocated. I think that the next one is important. Depends on your context. I don't know if you have management or a CEO, but actually talking with them, giving them feedback on how it went, asking for feedback on how they think you went. Do any of you come from groups that have a CEO or staff or management like that? Or are you all from like bare bones? We are the management as well. Yeah. You've got like CEOs and things or no?
Managers.
You've got managers and yeah. So I guess it's the gap. So the role of the chair in those contexts is to kind of be the filter between the board and the employees and the management. So just encouraging an active dialogue, like how did it go? Like the board really needed more information than was provided. We couldn't really make a decision because we didn't know the full context. So trying to get information through for the board to decide. Work with the minute taker to draft the minutes. Well, this is an interesting one. Are you as the chair, the minute taker? Sometimes that happens and it's not good because if you're chairing well, we were just saying before, it's a lot of EQ. It's looking around the room, like what's going on. So if you're trying to also take the notes and summarize things, yeah, it's too many roles to have. Do any of you chair and take minutes, or are you been able to get somebody else to do it?
Generally, the secretary of the society feedback.
You have a secretary to, yeah. So they've got a specific position and they'll do it. Yeah.
Might be taking and other
Great. Well, that's the right answer because I think it shouldn't be the chair that's trying to record all that happened in the meeting. All right, getting the minutes out as quickly as is practicable. How often have you had a meeting and then the minutes come like the day before the next meeting, maybe 2 months later? Can you remember what happened? Like, I can't, my memory is not great, right? I can't remember what we talked about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So the principle here is a simple one. Get your minutes out as quickly as is practicable so that people can actually review them. And that's the point, to say, wait a minute, we need to correct this, rather than waiting until the meeting itself. Yeah. All right, and then number 20, we've put here, reflecting on your chairing, considering what worked well, what could be improved. Consider asking for constructive feedback. That's pretty hard to do, right? Like no one likes to receive feedback, particularly if it might be, you could have done this better. But if we want to grow and improve, then that's the best way. It's the easiest way to learn is to ask someone, how do you think I did? What are some things that you noticed that I could improve? That's a good thing to be asking, I think. So you could even have someone in the meeting who you trust to start with. Just say, I want you to take some notes, watch me, and then give me some feedback. Like, I would love to learn. I want to get better. All right, the last bit of advice I have there is be kind to yourself. If you're chairing a meeting, you've taken on a responsibility. It's not easy. It's not intuitive. It's not straightforward. It's not something that just you roll out of bed and now you can chair meetings. It's coming to things like this. Hopefully this is helping to provoke you to think. Lots of it you might be thinking, oh, actually, yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I know lots of these things, but others of it, it might be thinking, we could try this, we could do that, we could improve. So yeah, it's a continual learning journey. Has anybody got anything they want to say about the after the meeting part? No? You check in with the trustees afterwards? Yep. Yep. And how do you do that? Do you just give them a phone call or a text? Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
We've got a deadline on the task that has been allocated to everyone. And then try to follow the deadline by everyone else.
Okay, so you've got deadlines for each of the tasks of when
Right.
things need to be
Right.
done and
Try to do it within the deadline.
and do it within the deadline. Yep, that's great. Cool. All right, well, those are the key points that I wanted to share about chairing a meeting well. At the back, there are some other comments that people had from LinkedIn. So I thought we might just run through those. So if you turn to the final pages, let's just have a look at those. Julie Hood, she said, remove general business from the agenda. It's either an agenda item with a relevant paper or it's irrelevant and time-consuming non-board related chat. It's kind of strong, but what do we think? So the point is, if it's going to be discussed at the board meeting, it should be on the agenda rather than a free-for-all at the end. Let's talk about this other thing. If it's really that important, then it deserves to have its own time allocated.
To rewind a bit then, because if you were to remove that, you remove an option, which I don't disagree with.
Yeah.
When should that be taking place? If you're writing an agenda a week before the meeting, are you going out to your committee members to say, do you have any agenda items?
I think yeah, and this is a great point. So I think we were talking about the agenda should come out.
So local committees and sports committees and various things like that, they are working 40, 50-hour weeks.
Yeah. This is on the side, right?
Of all that helping out well. So yeah, when is an appropriate time?
Yeah, well, I guess it's going to be slightly different for each committee and the context. But I would think if you want to send the agenda out a week before with papers and things, then working back from that, you really need to know what's going to be on the agenda. Maybe this is part of the checking in though. After the last board meeting, is there something that you think we should be talking about at the next board meeting? That would probably be the most natural time. I didn't raise it in the board meeting, but I think we should look at funding applications because we're running out of money. So let's add it to the agenda for the next meeting. Yeah. Kate Frickberg, she's an amazing woman up in Wellington. She said her top tip was the equity of voice. So people agree and self-monitor to ensure that they don't hog the floor. So in a meeting of 5 people, you should speak on average about 1/5 of the time. So she's a governance expert, and she's written a blog on that at that website, Kate Frickberg's website. Alta here says an effective chairperson also ensures that there's consensus at the conclusion of the topic about what's agreed, what the actions are. I think we covered that, but it's looking, what did we decide? Giselle emphasizes that following up, leading the board's culture and workload beyond the meetings is a really important part of being the chair. So I'm just going to let you all work out what that might mean in your context. One of the things I've found is actually quite an interesting thing to try would be, if you're willing to do it, choose like an article or a book or something and circulate it, and say, hey, everyone, at the next meeting, we're going to have 10 minutes at the end or sometime to talk about this article on governance. I do a podcast called Board Matters. So I do Seeds as one podcast. Another one is called Board Matters, which is for the Institute of Directors. And I've spoken with more than 20 experienced directors about governance. They're 10 minutes to 15 minutes long, really short, sharp things. Maybe we can send the link out after. But that would be something, if you liked one of them, you could send it to your committee and say, hey, everyone, let's all listen to this 10 minutes on this aspect of governance. Like it might be succession planning. What does a board need to think about to succession plan? Who's coming to replace us? So let's talk about that at our next board meeting. And this is a little thought-provoking excerpt of something to get us thinking. Yeah, so outside of the meeting, there's a lot more to be done. Kate Hodgson says having a clear agenda. Yeah, having the opportunity to table questions before the meeting allows for a streamlined, informed discussion and a focus on decision-making at the meeting itself. It's interesting, isn't it? Like if they've read the papers beforehand and there's a question, actually sending it around before. Kathy says, including time for each person to reflect on the meeting. I think she's meeting at the end of the meeting. What went well? What were the lessons we learned? What are the takeaways? Well, that could provide some really raw feedback, right? It's the end of the meeting, everyone. How did we do? Well, we spent too long on this, and I thought that person, no, we were good. Paul Brown gives 4 principles from the book called The Great Chair. He said, number 1, separate people from the problem. Number 2, focus on interests, not positions. Number 3, invent options for mutual gain. And number 4, insist on objective criteria. And as chair, always think WAIT, which is acronym for why am I talking? Just quite a good way of thinking it. Mr. G, he's a cool startup guy here in Christchurch. Relationship design, it's the soft stuff at the start. Get people to give permission. What's the best mode of discussion within your group? What should the pace be? How do we know decisions should be made? How to prepare? So I guess it's taking everyone on the journey of having a meeting. Yeah, Seaway talks there about having time at the start of meetings to be able to discuss, making sure that the meetings start and finish on time. Sounds basic, but how often have we been in meetings that just keep going? And Anne talked about, yeah, one-on-one coaching. Yeah, that before and after the board meeting, going over things with your members. So anyway, there's some wisdom there that hopefully is of help. The last thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm really open to questions or comments that you've got, is on the second page, there's a whole bunch of pictures there. So it's just so you know, there's a lot of resources. Our firm in particular has put a lot of time and effort into creating books and resources. So this here I brought some examples. So there's one there that is mentioned called social enterprise in New Zealand. So that's looking at how can you have your organization actually get sustainable funding. So beyond charitable, please, sir, give me more. What are some ways that you can build business practices within a charitable world? So that one's people tell me it's very helpful. And this one here, this was actually done for Selma District Council, governance masterclass for community groups. So some of the concepts we've been talking about, we go into that in this. This is just a free download. I think we videoed this as well, the talk that we gave. So that's up online. This one here just came out. It's called the Charities Health Check, and it's been crowdsourced. So I got almost 100 people to help me write this. And it's a series of questions that you as boards can be asking. You can see here, it's like lots of different thought-provoking questions about topics. There's 6 parts to it. This is the overview. Then there's one on governance, one on people, one on assets, one on policies, and a specific one for faith groups. So that's also a free document. And then some of you mentioned your incorporated societies. Guess what? You get to re-register within the next 2 years. So this is a guide for incorporated societies that we wrote. It has everything that you need to know about re-registering or considering if you should re-register. Because for some groups, a volunteer-led, member-led group that has yearly elections isn't the most appropriate legal vehicle. And it's actually a good moment to say, let's switch to become a charitable trust or some other entity. So that's also available. We've got a whole bunch of videos about incorporated societies and what you need to know on our information hub as well. And then this one here specifically for churches, so faith group legal handbook. But we have a version of that, which is charities, a legal handbook. So you get the sense there's a lot of free material, right? And then as well as supporting community groups, we help a lot of startups. So some of you might have other hats. And so this is the startups legal toolkit, goes into everything you need to know about business. Yeah, and there's even more. So on the desk, I've left some information about Seeds podcast. Like I said, 383 interviews of inspiring people. One of the latest ones was Tatipene O'Regan. And I didn't ask him about treaty settlements or prime ministers. I asked him, who were the people that shaped you to become the person that you are today? So an hour and 50 minutes talking with he won Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year, like in 2022, I think. So lots of good stories there. So you're welcome to take a card. It's in Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Feel free to pass the card on to someone else. And then the other card there is about this, which is a book called The Apple Tree. So that's something, maybe we can send this link at some point. It's a children's storybook written to encourage people like you that what you do matters, even though you don't see the results right away. So I wrote it as a short story and then got an illustrator to help me to bring it to life. So that's just being released now. It might be something that interests you as well. And I've got lots of copies in my garage, so trying to get the word out about it. Yeah. So has anybody got any questions either in the room or online? Really appreciate everybody who's joined online.
Like one available to access online or?
Yeah, they're all online. Yeah. Which one were you interested in? The doing business. Yeah, it's downloadable. Actually, what we did hyperlinks for all of this. So if you've got this as a PDF, I think you've emailed it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so if you go into it, you can click and then the PDF has the links and then it should hopefully pop up. But now we've met each other, right? So if there's something that you want, just feel free to send me an email. I do, as you said, I have a commute. I work some of the time here in Rolliston. We have an office just down the road. But some of the days I'll go into our city office. So that's like 20-minute, 25-minute commute. I'm really happy to spend it talking with any of you if you have a question. I would rather do that than listen to the radio, right? Like I would rather use my time to give into a community group or someone who's doing something really amazing. Yeah, and our firm has 80 people in it, so we're quite big. We can do property work, we can do disputes work, we can do company work, and then we can also help with this sort of area of legal structures, getting them right, and answering questions that you might have. Any other questions?
One.
Yeah,
How do you deal with board fatigue? You've got lots of members, there are lots of different boards, and they are just filling a seat.
yeah. How do you deal with board fatigue where people are on lots of boards or they're just filling a seat?
Yeah.
So are they kind of punching in because then they feel like they have an obligation to be there, do you think? Or
Yeah.
One of the things that I think, we hadn't touched on this, so thanks for raising it. I think that one of the things we don't do well is have rotations of board members. In other words, we sometimes assume that if you come on the board, you're there for life. And actually having a defined period, 2 years, 3 years, it's a natural moment in time. Maybe they'll be reappointed or something, but it's actually a moment to say, you finished your 2 years or your 3 years, you can now step off the board. And there's not this pressure of like, I'm going to be here for 10 years or 20 years. So that would be part of my answer. The other part is, as the chair, just trying to make it engaging and interesting. Like there's something to be said for that too. Has anybody else got thoughts for that question? What was that?
Sparking their passion back to what we're doing.
Yeah, sparking their passion. I think we didn't mention this, but a good chair will always call people back to what's our why. There's a very famous book now called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And he talks about the fact that why we need to understand why we do what we do. If you're writing that down, if you Google SINEK and then probably Sinek why, that would probably bring it up. He did a TED Talk and it's about 15 minutes. If you watch that TED Talk, you won't have to buy the book. So he summarizes the entire book into the, like many books these days, the actual essence of the core of it is like very short. So yeah, start with why, call people back to what caused them to join the board or why are they on the board. I think that's a really good thing that we can do as chairs. Yeah, great question. Any other thoughts? How about for you, about to become a chair or you're becoming a chair? Is this going to help some of the thoughts? Or-
Yeah,
Yeah, it's helpful.
when you're part of multiple different boards and you're becoming the chair of one that's predominantly been role run by significantly older males who are
Yeah.
all about, it must be moved, it must be seconded, it's.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
the opposite.
this is-
So this is kind of some.
Well, hopefully it frees up.
That's-
Feel free to take some copies with you. I think that there's something to be said for the chair helps set the tone for the board. And it's okay for you to bring your own personality and to bring a sense of fun and to bring a sense of this may be how it was done, but from now on, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently and getting people to buy into that. Like that's part of why you should have different chairs, people moving through and different trustees or members or officers. Like you don't want it to just become stagnant, which is your problem. Maybe that we've just been here forever and this is how we do things. Yeah.
Moving and seconding, I find that that's good to stop. It stops people from talking about the top. Now we need to come back and think about making a decision. And we get to make a decision, we make a decision.
Yeah, that's a great comment. So for the people listening, having a moving or seconding moment causes you to crystallize that discussion say, okay, now we're moving forward. Yeah, I hear you. And it's fine. If you want to do that, that's totally fine. I think that it can be done as well by a good chair saying, okay, everyone, we've had a wonderful discussion now. We have to move forward because our agenda says we're moving on, but here's what I'm hearing. And then reflect it back. Okay, does everyone agree? Okay, let's note for the minutes that we've decided to fill in the blank. So, yeah. Great. Well, yeah, hopefully this was helpful. It was meant to be practical, right? Like it wasn't a textbook lecture, but I'm giving you some thoughts of things that I've experienced. And I just want to encourage you, if you're here because you are a chair or you're stepping into the chair role, it will be hard, but it is rewarding. And what you're doing really matters. We need more people to step into leadership and governance positions. So I want to encourage you, feel like, yes. And if you're not a chair or you're on another board or something, why not get your phone out and text to the chair that you're on and say, thank you for what you do. Because being a chair is kind of a thankless position. It's very rare that someone actually says, hey, I really appreciate the role that you play as the chair. So that's a simple thing. It takes 20 seconds to send someone a note saying, thanks for being the chair, love what you do. That's it, like keep it simple. All right, so thank you, everybody. Look forward to staying engaged and we can keep conversations going. So hopefully that was helpful. And thanks everybody online.
Thank you.
I think someone actually commented and summarized it really well, saying you're a superstar.
Oh.
So yeah, thank you. Thank you from my or Selwyn District Council's perspective. Steve, he volunteers his time. He's not being paid to be here. And you can tell he's obviously pretty passionate about it and all the resources. So what I'll do is I'll send, you've obviously all got my emails because you've been getting the resources. Yep. So I'll send you through just some other stuff, a link to that TED talk, etc. Anything else that Steve wants circulated. And also my role here is to be able to support you and your organizations you're connected with. So if you have any feedback, I'm pretty authentic in my approach. So if you have anything that you'd like to hear from or people that you'd like to hear from that you think would be beneficial, please just reach out to me. And yeah, I echo again, I've been in community development for a long time, 23 years. I know I don't look that old, but a long time. And honestly, I've never had someone like Steve to be able to engage with that's just so proactive, very well qualified and connected, who just wants the best for our organizations. So we're really, really blessed to have him in our community and utilize him as much as possible. So thank you. Thank you for your time. He wants you to connect with him. I want you to, but I also want you to connect with me. So thank you all for coming tonight, and please just reach out to me if you need anything. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.